Good evening and welcome to Wednesday's Midlands Today from the BBC. Tonight, now government cuts hit our arts and theatre projects. Funding to the Arts Council is to be cut by 15% from next year.
23 organisations lose all their funding from the Arts Council, although some new projects are being funded. Why does it matter to the Midlands? Well, it's also about jobs and generating money. More than 100,000 people are employed in the creative sector in the West Midlands, which is 4.4% of the region's workforce. And in 2007-2008, the arts generated nearly £3 billion, making up just over 4% of our economy. The government says the arts has to take a share of the pain in tackling the deficit, and it's taken a smaller hit than other departments. Here's our arts reporter, Lindsay Doyle.
Mark Antony shall say, I am not well.
The arts remind us what it is to be human. The words of the artistic director of the world-renowned Royal Shakespeare Company, which today took a substantial cut in funding. The Arts Council has revealed which arts organisations are to receive grants from next year.
Goals are around supporting really excellent arts organisations that reach audiences, that are diverse, that work with children and young people, that show strong leadership, and obviously also have strong governance and are financially viable. And that's really important, that we're investing in organisations that are truly resilient.
Of the big players, the Birmingham Royal Ballet and the RSC are amongst those who have taken the full 15% cut, though the RSC does receive a one-off grant of £4.5 million for the development of its new theatre. The Birmingham Rep and the CBSO fared slightly better.
It's certainly been our experience in the Rep that when we take a risk and when we do something that we're not quite sure about, we actually get a better result than if we think we're trying to play safe. So for us, the way to get out of the issue is to produce more and more interesting and exciting work that people want to see.
Every county in our region has been affected by the Arts Council cuts. The public in West Bromwich loses its grant. The building isn't funded by the Arts Council, but its arts programme is. They say it will be affected. Ludlow Assembly Rooms in Shropshire, they lose their backing from the Arts Council, but they say they're determined to carry on. Malvern Theatres in Worcestershire, they lose their grant, but they do receive money from other organisations. Contemporary Glass in Kings Winford and Open Theatre in Coventry, also now without Arts Council backing. Recent research has shown the arts is a money spinner. For every pound spent on the arts, £14 is generated in income for the local economy. But one leading industrialist says tough times mean tough decisions.
I think the arts, of course, have got to take their share of the cuts that are necessary in the country, and it wouldn't be right if they were ring-fenced completely. But what we need to do is look at the way that the communities of the West Midlands can benefit from what the arts can provide.
There are some who are celebrating today. A number of touring and dance companies have received more money, while there are 8 new companies on the grant list. Lindsay Doyle, BBC Midlands Today.
So, while 8 projects in the Midlands have been given money for the first time, the future is more uncertain for many smaller arts groups.
Some say they're hopeful of getting funding from other places. Joanne Riddle reports on what the next 12 months will bring for the less famous events and organisations.
Lift it. Yep.
England's blind football team is based at the Royal National College for the Blind in Hereford. The sports profile was boosted, particularly around the Blind Football World Cup last summer, by the Hereford Photography Festival. But the arts project lost all its Arts Council funding.
Well, it's not good. It's not good for us, not good for them. So it's disappointing, really.
Partially sighted students also learned photography skills and produced images which rely on touch.
It's difficult because we do a lot of socially engaged projects, a lot of community projects, like the one here at the Royal National College and at the Point 4 around the Blind Football World Cup. So obviously that means these sort of things are put into jeopardy.
Last year, the Hereford Photography Festival staged 40 exhibitions in the West Midlands, attracting over 100,000 visitors, many of whom would not normally come to see art. 60 miles away in inner-city Birmingham, Craft Space is keeping its Arts Council funding. This is one of the group's projects, bringing a weaver originally from San Francisco to Atwood Green.
I do find that the support in the US for the arts becomes very privatized and it becomes very commercially driven. And so I've actually done this project there in gallery settings, like in commercial galleries, and it has to be very prettied up for the collectors. And doing it in a grittier, more public way is an opportunity that I've really enjoyed.
We'll be receiving over 3 years period about £600,000 thereabouts. And so that's roughly, 200 a year, and we will be using that to the best of our ability.
Visitors were encouraged to get involved.
I don't think there's an awful lot of organisations in Birmingham to do with art.
Absolutely crucial. I think they're probably particularly crucial in areas where other things are collapsing, like car industries and social structures.
Back in Hereford, the photography festival will go ahead in November, but because 2/3 or £55,000 of its funding comes from the Arts Council, the project faces uncertainty next year. Joanne Riddle, BBC Midlands Today.
Well, we're joined now from Westminster by the Conservative MP for Stratford-upon-Avon, Nadeem Sahawi. Thanks for joining us, Mr Sahawi. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Nick. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Now, obviously, most people are having to bear the pain at the moment, but as a member of the governing coalition, you must have mixed feelings at the moment with the RSC in your patch, of course, suffering a big hit.
It is tough when you're borrowing £500 million a day to still maintain spending on arts and culture. But I think what Jeremy Hunt's tried to do is make sure that arts and culture don't take as big a hit as they would have done if they had to put through the full hit by using some of the lottery funding. So instead of spending £2,390 million over the next 3 years, he's cut it down to £2,250 million. That's still a substantial amount. The RSC is losing about £1 million in funding, but gaining £4.6 million as a sort of lottery funding because it's a new building and having to manage that new building. It is tough, of course, because it's a 15% cut, less so in cash terms, but 15% nevertheless. So it is very tough.
Can we just widen it out, perhaps? I mean, people could say that the arts are a luxury, so we shouldn't be too exercised about cuts, but they're actually very important to our economy, aren't they?
They're extremely important to our economy, especially when you've got the Olympics coming and the cultural Olympiads that we're looking so much forward to in Stratford-on-Avon, and smaller organisations. We've got a fantastic Orchestra of the Swan, which, again, didn't get its funding, and they were disappointed by that, but they have got other funding, and we're looking at more creative ways of actually helping fund the smaller arts organisations.
So you don't think this is a thin end of the wedge?
No, absolutely not. I think that it gives certainty to the arts. The Arts Council itself is having to save 50% in its back office costs. And so this is a good message in a tough time. Obviously, we'd like it to be more all the time. It is important as an industry for us in the West Midlands, but to think about what other departments have had to do to balance the books. When you're borrowing £500 million a day, £120 million in interest alone, just to stand still, the credit card has been maxed out,
okay,
and we've got to live within our means.
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, you've been sending us your thoughts about the proposed cuts. Jane from Pershore emailed to say she doesn't think there should be cuts to music, arts or the theatre. She says the cuts would cause the future preservation of our history to be lost, as music, art and plays have always told the stories of our lives on some level.
But Mervyn Owen, no relation, says all funding of the arts should be stopped entirely until the economic situation improves. Instead, the money should be used to ensure that no one's being subjected to unnecessary pain or suffering. Thanks for those for the time being. We hope to bring some more of your thoughts later in the programme.
Just at the end of the programme. Well, still ahead here on Midlands Today.